That's the thing. You can show you never did. I want to bet on my brother-in-law's there, and want to invite some friends. God, I just feel that. And it was inspired to declare that doesn't exist in the visible impact world.
Okay, let's get started. We had just started this likutim. If a person collects a debt, and then at some point later he discovers that some of the bills or the coins that he was paid with are counterfeit. So this is a question that is a machlokes. He says, because basically the debtor is basically saying, well, I don't know if I'm the one who gave you that cash or not. So I don't know if I owe you any more money or not. And the Taz says, it's like a person who says, I acknowledge that I did owe you money, and I'm not sure if I paid you back the debt or not. So basically, he has to take a shavua saying that he doesn't know. And then he'll be pater, midine adam, but he'll be chayiv midine shamayim. Aval hashach pasak the harashadam keharashadam the davke im halatoin bori shenosati lachatovim az niftar al yidei shvua. He says that if the debtor says, I know for a fact that every bill that I gave you was not counterfeit, then he can take a shvua and exempt himself. But if he says, but if he doesn't know for sure that every bill that was given was good and was not counterfeit, he has to replace and pay him with to make him whole. Mishum dahavale kaomer eni yodeya im paraticha, because it's like a guy who says, I don't know if I properly paid you back. And in that situation, the bo kaimalon im hamal v'tovo vadai, that if the creditor, if the plaintiff claims you definitely gave me counterfeit bills, the chayiv gam b'dinei adam, then he's liable even from an earthly court standpoint. Okay, we'll skip the rest of the parentheses. But what if the creditor says, I found some counterfeit bills. I think they may have come from you, but I don't know for sure. An example of that would be the creditor collects the debt, and then he uses that cash to pay somebody else. And that third party comes back to him and says, some of the money that you gave me was counterfeit. So now he can't say for sure that the guy gave him counterfeit bills, because maybe that third party got counterfeit bills mixed in from somewhere else. He says, there the lova will be potter, because the malva, the creditor, is not making a definitive claim. Vahatumim chilek bein piraon schara miyad shalakcho, the lo chal me'olam anosein amos shum chiyu, v'zeh vaday de potter. And the tumim, Rav Yonasan Eibeshitz, he creates a distinction between a purchase, and in the case of a purchase, if the seller later claims that the bills that were exchanged for the purchase were counterfeit, he says in that situation, because the buyer says he doesn't know, he's going to be pater. Aval b'halva o piraon mecher sheparelo la'achar zman bazeh yesh chiluk. But if it's a payment of a debt, or let's say payment for a purchase that is late at a later time, he says there the debtor is at a greater disadvantage. Because if the debtor did not carefully examine the cash before he gave it to the creditor. Az chayev lekablan miyad hamalve. So dahava ke'eni odeyim paraticha. So then he has to accept the malva's claim. He has to accept the creditor's claim, because it's basically he's saying, I don't know if I paid you back what I owe you. Avalim iein bahem v'lo ra'a bahem chisaron b'zeh yish lepatru ayin shamatam. But if he says, I carefully examined the money that I gave you, and there was no counterfeit signs on it at all, then he's basically saying, I know for sure that I paid you back. He says, it would seem to me that when you exchange foreign currency, and like, for example, I give you shekels and immediately you give me dollars in exchange, which was all the craze when this is being written. Today, it's the opposite. Today, the dollar is much weaker against the shekel as far as its stability. The ladas rov haposkim havale kaomer eini yodeya im lavisi upater b'dinei adam v'chayev b'dinei shamayim. And then one of the parties discovers that what you gave me was counterfeit bills, counterfeit shekels, whatever it is. So then, and a person says, well, I don't know if I did or not. So he's going to be pater midinei adam. He's going to be pater from an earthly standpoint, but he'll be liable from a heavenly standpoint. So that's his conclusion, is that if the claim comes back afterwards that what you gave me was, some of it was counterfeit bills, I can't take you to court over it, because it's you don't know for sure that it came from me, but I'm still chayev b'dinei shamayim, because if the guy says, I do believe I got it from you, he says, and basically, I don't know whether I'm liable to you or not. Shek sheshulambo bala chanus hever hala es hashek yachar zman rav roa bal hachek shelo huchnas hachek lebank ukvar ovar zmano. He says, if I write a check for a purchase, and after a significant amount of time, I notice that the check has not been cashed, but I've still received the goods. So what is my halachic obligation in that situation? I have no legal obligation to pay the storekeeper for the goods after that. If he chose for whatever reason not to cash the check, I'm not obligated halachically to pay him, or to make a point of going out of my way to pay him, because he may have chosen, for whatever reason, not to. He may have lost the check. He may have decided to give me the goods for free. Maybe he tore up the check because he wanted to give me a matana. But I'm not obligated to try and figure out why he didn't cash the check. So then I think you do have an obligation. All right, he's talking about a case where you have nothing to do with this storekeeper. It was a long time ago, and you just discover after going through your bank book that this check was never cashed, which is not such a prevalent thing anymore, because not a lot of people pay with checks anymore. Okay, let's go on to the next halacha. We're not going to do the biurim. So I think what we're going to do is just go on to the next halacha. Lamed Beis. Halove sheratza lifroa lahamalva al yedei shaliach. So a guy owes money. Shimon owes money to Reuven, and he wants to pay Ruvain via proxy. V'nasan hamos lechavero, so he gives the money to Levi, and he says to him, "Va'omer lo holech mos elu lahamalva o lashon acher." He says, "Give this money to Ruvain, or some other language, shemishmo b'lashon holech, or any other language where he says transport this money to Ruvain. Kagon samos elu leploni, or if he says carry this money to Ruvain. Oh yehiman is leploni, or if he says to Levi, this money should go to Ruvain. So what it's tantamount, in other words, there's a halachic issue. Who is the owner of the money while it's in transit? Who is the liable party? When money is in transit from a debtor to a creditor, who's the responsible party for that money? So if I give the money to Levi and I say, bring this to Ruvain, at what point does Ruvain become the owner of that money? Does he become the owner of the money when it reaches his hands, which is what you would normally think? Or do we say that Levi is really not only the proxy of Shimon, but he's the proxy of Ruvain as well? So as soon as it comes into Levi's hands, it now is owned by Ruvain. And we'll see what the ramifications of this are momentarily. Yes, you would think that it would. So let's see how we're going to qualify this halacha. So it's tantamount to Ruvain, to Shimon saying to Levi, I want you to acquire this money on behalf of Ruvain, so that as soon as you take hold of it, it now becomes Ruvain's money, and you've now acquired it for him. And the reason why it works that way is Shazachim la'adam shelo b'fanav, v'shuv ein halove rashai lachzor bo v'litol hamos miyadu shel zeh v'lifro lahamal ve'achar kach. So the point being is, what if the debtor, Shimon, changes his mind and he says, I've decided that I'll pay him myself instead of using you as the proxy? At what point does Levi say to him, I'm sorry, but when you gave me the money, I acquired that money on behalf of Ruvain, and therefore you can't ask me for the money back. It's not yours anymore. I would have to ask Ruvain for permission to give you the money before I can give it back to you. And the principle being, there's a principle called Zachin La'adam Shelo B'fanav, that we create merit for a person in his absence. What does that mean? We create merit for a person in his absence. If I can, even if I've not appointed your proxy, even if you never appointed me your proxy, but if I can do a favor for you on your behalf by acquiring something on your behalf, then as soon as I pick it up, it becomes yours, even though you never appointed me as your proxy. And this is a principle that's brought down in the Gemara in a number of places. As soon as I pick it up, it becomes yours, even though you don't even know about it. Okay? So, and therefore, if Shimon decides that he'd rather pay Ruvain directly, he doesn't have a right to demand the money back from Levi unless Ruvain gives express permission. V'im chazaro v'rotza litlam lo yachzirim lo zeh shekiblem. And therefore, if Levi already received the money and Shimon wants to ask for the money back, Levi does not have permission even to give the money back to Shimon. V'im yachzirim lo yischayiv shalem lahamalva im lo yishalem lo halova. To the point where, let's say Shimon takes back the money and never pays Ruvain back for the loan. Then you know who's on the hook for that money? Levi, the proxy. Because since he already accepted it on behalf of Ruvain, and he then was basically looking at it from that standpoint, he was taking Ruvain's money, giving it to Shimon. And now he's on the hook for that money. Okay, so the im halova ma'ayem alav b'davar sheyesh biyado lasos lo tsar haguf ein tzarach letzar gufo b'shvil mamano shel chavero. If, however, Shimon says, "Give me back the money, or if not, I'm going to beat you up." What happens if he says that? He says, like he says to him, "What are you talking about? You're not going to give me back the money." So Levi says, "Well, I learned in Shir that once I accepted the money as payment for Reuven, I'm not allowed to give it back to you." So Shimon says, "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. Give it back to me, or you're going to be sorry." And so Levi says to him, "What do you mean by that?" And Shimon says, "I'm going to take you into the backyard and I'm going to knock you up silly." And so if that's the case, then Levi is allowed to surrender the money to Shimon. Why? Because a person is not obligated to experience physical pain in order to save someone else's money. You're not obligated to subject yourself to getting beaten up in order to save someone from, like if someone holds you up and they say, "Give me your money or I'm going to beat you up." And you say, "But it's not my money." You're not obligated to endanger yourself, or even if you know your life is not in danger, but you're going to get beaten up. You're not mechuyev to get beaten up in order to protect someone else's money. Because now that Shimon is threatening you and is coercing you, you're allowed to surrender. You're allowed to surrender the money. But what if Shimon is not physically threatening Levi? But Shimon basically says, "If you don't give me back the money, I'm going to go take something of yours as security," because and that's considered an act of theft. That's stealing, because Shimon, you have no right to take it. Halachically, Levi is doing the right thing by not giving you back the money. Shimon is incensed, doesn't know the halacha, and so he's so upset with Levi for not giving him back the money that he's now going to go into his garage and take his lawnmower. Okay, he says that's not enough of a reason for Levi to surrender the money. You're going to steal my lawnmower? Is that what you're threatening me with? Go ahead, steal my lawnmower. I'll file a police report. I'll videotape you stealing my lawnmower, whatever it is. But you have no right to do that. He says, because at the end of the day, Levi is not being physically coerced. He's just being threatened that he's going to lose money. He says, Kima hefresh lahala bein mamon zeh lemamon shel zeh. He says, because what difference does it make if it's his money or somebody else's money? You're not, if someone's stealing from you, they're stealing from you. That doesn't give you a right to say, okay, I'll give you the guy's money. What right do you have to save yourself from being robbed by giving up someone else's money and letting him rob the other guy's money? Okay? And even though Reuven will not be liable for Shimon's theft of the lawnmower, you'll have to take Shimon to court or file a police report, and they'll force Shimon to return what he stole. But you're not allowed to save your own assets by giving up the assets of somebody else. So this is the basic halacha. The basic halacha states that it's a bizarre sounding halacha, but technically, as soon as Shimon gave Levi the money, Levi does not have a right to surrender it back to Shimon unless he gets permission from Reuven, because he's acquired it on behalf of Reuven. And Shimon, not being a learned man, is not going to understand this, is going to get upset. They may get into an altercation, and you have to determine if the altercation is going to become physical, then Levi should surrender the money, because he's not obligated to get himself hurt for someone else's debt. But if it's not because, but if it's just a question of losing his own money, he's obligated to subject his own money to loss.